The United States and other countries are sending significant military aid to Ukraine in a breakthrough development. Well, we can admit that Trump's team has finally seen the light, and right now the United States is coordinating with Europe on a new, truly large batch of military aid for Ukraine. Today there was a new meeting of the Coalition of the Willing in support of Ukraine, and there was a real breakthrough there. Let me remind you, it was founded by France and Britain. But today something happened that will make the Kremlin very nervous. First of all, it was announced that while everyone thought this format had long been dead, the Europeans have fully developed and even prepared a European military contingent to be sent to Ukraine. Secondly, representatives of the United States of America joined the meeting of the Coalition of Willing Countries for the first time. Previously, the Americans did not participate in the coalition meetings. Well, Britain insisted that the United States also take part in the military deterrence efforts in Ukraine. Moreover, Washington agrees to provide Ukraine with new Patriot systems and is actively encouraging Europe to do the same. In fact, today, Marco Rubio, without mincing words, directly stated that if Europe says Ukraine is important, then Europe is simply obliged to hand over all its unused air defense systems to Ukraine. And fourthly, it was announced today that Britain is providing thousands of air defense missiles to Ukraine, while other European countries and the United States have prepared multi-million-dollar military aid packages. I'm Pechiy. Today is July 10th. More details to follow. But before we begin, I ask you to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, write any comment, and be sure to subscribe to my Telegram channel. The link to it is in the description of this video. So today, Britain and France officially announced the establishment of the Resolute coalition headquarters in Paris, which will coordinate the deployment of troops in Ukraine in the event of a ceasefire. The headquarters will move between London and Paris every 12 months on a rotational basis. And this is where things get really interesting, because many thought that the initiative of Emmanuel Macron and Keir Starmer to send troops to Ukraine had long been dead. People had even stopped talking about it, but it turned out to be quite the opposite. No one was just discussing it publicly. So the command structure of the European support forces in Ukraine has been agreed upon, and it will focus on three main areas. The first is the restoration of the Ukrainian ground forces, providing logistics and weapons and training soldiers and instructors. This is the first direction. The second is ensuring the security of Ukrainian airspace for the full resumption of civilian flights after the ceasefire. That is, it will be the Europeans who will ensure the security of Ukrainian airspace, and this will definitely stop the Kremlin from trying to disrupt the ceasefire. And third, it is ensuring the safety of navigation in the Black Sea. In this context, expanding the capabilities of Turkey, Romania, and Bulgaria for maritime demining and port security. Even Turkey is prepared to intervene in this situation. In fact, based on these 3 points, it can be understood that the Europeans are ready to take on the lion's share of Ukraine's security after the ceasefire. Yes, I can understand some skepticism about this issue, because the key word here is in case of a ceasefire. That is, all of this will start working when a truce is reached, but for now a ceasefire is not in sight. But at the same time, the Europeans still decided to create an official structure with an entire headquarters. And here, it must be admitted that, in fact, this is the first official interstate structure to support Ukraine during the entire war. Even the Ramstein format operated in a certain format. That is, it's a situational alliance that, if anything happens, can fall apart immediately. As soon as a ceasefire happens there, meaning there's no need to gather and coordinate arms supplies, Ramstein can simply disappear. As you recall, the Americans were initially in charge there, but then they wanted to transfer control to NATO before changing their minds. So, this is an important format for Ukraine, but still it was not a fully official interstate structure. This coalition headquarters of the Resolute is the first official interstate structure for supporting Ukraine. But something else is even more symbolic. Representatives of the United States of America joined the meeting of the Coalition of Willing Countries for the first time. Previously, Americans did not participate in coalition meetings, but today, at the session, Trump's special envoy to Ukraine, General Kit Kellogg, and Senators Graham and Blumenthal, who are pushing for sanctions against Russia, were present. This is important because London insisted that the United States also physically participate in ensuring Ukraine's security. Well, as you understand, the first step has already been taken. The Americans were present at this meeting and accordingly signaled that they are also participating in this. But there is also more practical news. Today, Zelensky said that he had a positive dialogue with Trump regarding Ukraine's request for 10 Patriot systems and missiles for them. It also became known that Germany, Norway, and other yet unnamed partners are ready to pay for them. In particular, it is known that Germany is ready to pay for 2 Patriot systems for Ukraine. Norway is allocating money for 1 more, and another 7 will be paid for by other European countries that do not want to announce it publicly yet. But the main question is, are the United States ready to sell these systems? And here there is also a certain breakthrough. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz stated that he has already discussed with Trump the issue of supplying more Patriot systems and missiles for Ukraine, although the issue has not been fully resolved yet. I'll explain what's happening next. But first, let me quote Friedrich Merz. The Americans themselves need some of the Patriot systems, but they also have a lot of them. The decision on the delivery hasn't been finalized yet, but we both agree that the interests of Germany and Europe regarding the growth of the free market economy, energy security, and political freedom are directly linked to supporting Ukraine in its struggle against Russia. But right now it's clear that there are negotiations going on between Europe and the United States about who is willing to provide Ukraine with Patriot systems and how many. So the question isn't whether they're willing to provide them, but how many. As we can see, it's not a matter of money here, meaning it's not about who will allocate funds to buy these systems. Germany and Norway have reportedly allocated funds for 3 such systems without issue, according to public statements. They say they're ready to buy them even today, just hand them over. In Ukraine, the issue isn't about money. United States Secretary of State Marco Rubio said today that the United States wants to help Ukraine strengthen its air defense, and for this purpose they are discussing with NATO allies whether the Europeans can transfer their existing Patriot air defense systems to Kyiv. And here Marco Rubio didn't hold back at all in his statements today. Even though the United States is the manufacturer of the Patriot air defense systems and operates the largest number of these systems in the world, Marco Rubio was outraged that no one in Europe wants to share these systems with Ukraine. And next, I'll give a very interesting quote from Marco Rubio. If Ukraine is truly a priority, as many European countries claim, then they should be ready to share their Patriot batteries, which they don't need right now. I hope that we will be able to convince some of our NATO partners to provide these Patriot batteries to Ukraine, because there are a number of countries that have them, but no one wants to part with them. Spain and Germany, in particular, could transfer their systems to Ukraine. I also want to remind you that some European countries have previously ordered Patriot systems from the American manufacturer and should receive them soon. It would be great if one of them voluntarily postponed this delivery and sent it to Ukraine. That's why we're looking for creative ways to provide Ukrainians with this defensive weapon that they will need. End of quote, Marco Rubio. Overall, this approach could eventually lead to even more Patriot systems than were originally planned in Europe. That is, the United States is saying, yes, we are ready to transfer, but then the United States could simply force the Europeans to hand over the systems they already have to Ukraine or give up the ones they ordered from the Americans that are about to come off the production line. I'll add one more piece of news at the end. The United Kingdom and Ukraine have signed an agreement for the supply of missiles for air defense systems from TALS. We're talking about 5,000 air defense missiles. This was reported on the website of the United Kingdom government. And as stated in the government announcement, the country will produce missiles for TALS air defense systems for Ukraine. These deliveries will be ensured by guaranteed funding of more than $3 billion. The statement also says that the agreement to supply 5,000 air defense missiles will allow Ukraine to continue its fight against Russian aggression and will contribute to the growth of the British economy. So it's a win-win system. So both the British economy will benefit from this and Ukrainian security as well. I'll leave it at that. In this episode, share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like.